Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another exciting edition of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. And I'm your host, Ronald, Bethea, and you know if you join us on a regular basis, the slogan for this show, if there's power in numbers and the Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative, LLC, captures that power for your financial benefit. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. The Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative, LLC, serves as an economic blueprint to address the effects of high energy costs at our historically Black colleges and universities, to utilize Black-owned farmlands and HBCU campuses to develop capacity and initiatives for renewable energy projects to bring down the underemployment of young African and African-American men and women locally, nationally, and throughout the diaspora. Also to educate the African and African-American community about the economic impacts of climate change and the need for environmental education through Black Talk radio shows such as Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. Ladies and gentlemen, if you join us on a regular basis, you know that I'm your host, once again, Ron Bethea, and that our call-in number is 646-668-2948. Once again, that call-in number is 646-668-2948. Ladies and gentlemen, I was scheduled to have several guests on with me this morning, but Mr. Tony Henderson, with the imbalance, he indicated that he had an emergency and he could not join us this morning. Tony is a very, very dear friend of mine, and I reached out to him because he's in the financing arena in the renewable energy sector. And I wanted to, in fact, have him and one other close business affiliate, Mr. Will Shirley of Sundial Solar USA. Mr. Shirley is located in Jackson, Mississippi, and maybe he may get an opportunity to join us this morning. But anyway, the show must go on, and I'm here with you, and you're here with me. And once again, that call-in number is 646-668-2948. Please remember to press 1 on your phone pad after dialing the call-in number, because you'll be in our green room, and we want to bring you right on in the living room so we can sit down and have a discussion about our subject matter this morning, because we have some very, very important information that we want to share with our listening audience this week. Now, unless you've been or you are sleeping under a rock, you know that this week that I refer to him as COVID 45 plus 2 with 34 felony counts coming straight at you. We know him as the new President-elect Donald Trump. Now, he has signed a tremendous number of executive orders repealing and taking this country backwards. Now, we're not going to play games here on this platform. And we are looking at what has taken place. And there is a very, very outstanding article that was done by Jeff St. John's, and it was published on January 21st, 2025 with Commerical Media. And we're going to sort of share with you as we set the table around our show today. The Trump administration has ordered federal agencies to immediately pause the distribution of funds under the landmark federal climate and energy laws passed during the Biden administration, a move that throws tens of billions of dollars of lawful designated federal funding into limbo, and one of that is likely to be challenged in the courts. The pause of this distributing funds appropriately through the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure bill law, which is laid out in the section of the broader executive order unleashing America's energy entitled Terminating the Green New Deal. Now, let's drill down on this, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to share with you today that there is smoke and mirrors. That's a reality. And there is always follow the money, follow the money, follow the money when you are confused. Don't get it twisted. Let's look at what this really is about. Now, here in Washington, D.C., Donald Trump has adopted the Green New Deal moniker for a slew of energy and climate policies he opposes, including hundreds of billions of dollars in tax credits, grants, and incentives for clean energy, electric vehicles, and programs to reduce climate and environmental pollution. It order calls for the federal government to halt all the disbursements under the two laws while they review the process of policy and programs for issuing grants, loans, contracts, or any other financial disbursement of such appropriate funds for consistency with the law. It gives the federal agency 90 days to report to the Director of the Office of Management and Budget and head of the National Economic Council on how the frozen spending allowance aligns with the Trump administration's energy goals. Well, we know Trump doesn't have any energy goals. He is already, and we know he's in bed with the gas and oil and fossil fuel industry. He has made this very, very clear in his election campaign, and he's made it very, very clear. So none of this comes as a surprise to anyone. This is why yours truly launched back here on this platform, solely now in the future, with its economic impact on Black America, a national campaign asking the Biden-Harris administration to work within the 118th Congress and 19th Congress to codify funding for 40 initiatives that came out of Executive Order 14008 and 13985, which was the first executive order that Trump signed to repeal DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which was a part of the Biden-Harris's Justice 40 initiative that stated that 40% of all the investment of $1.7 trillion coming through the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act must be directed at low and moderate income communities across this country. And we're going to talk about some of those initiatives on this show today, ladies and gentlemen, and we're going to look at what this is really, really about. And in doing so, let's continue to look at this very, very informative article here that this gentleman wrote. Is likely to cause significant confusion for the many governmental entities and private sector companies that have been awarded funds. Alex Kanina, Director of Equity Research for the Commerical Capital Investment Banking Firm focused on clean infrastructure, wrote in a Tuesday research note. This would obviously stop any inappropriate funding, but to halt any disbursement suggests a broader move, such as stopping payment of funds that have already been approved and previously contracted, Tina wrote. The bottom line is the executive order injected a lot of uncertainty into the federal clean energy policy, and to turn out the courts seems likely. Tina noted that the executive order is unlikely to impact tax credits by the Inflation Reduction Act. Tax credits, not loans, grants, or contracts, make up the majority of the hundreds of billions of dollars in federal spending to flow through the Inflation Reduction Act, which Trump can call for rescinding entirely. But the Republicans in Congress and many industry groups have warned that ending the tax credits would undermine the economic development and job growth and incentives that have spurred largely in Republican districts. And that is the madness about this, ladies and gentlemen, that the MAGA group, who are the 77 million who voted for Trump, that Biden was strategic enough in his plan to lift all votes in this country, that he put the majority of this investment in red states. And the Republicans, not one of them voted for the bipartisan infrastructure bill or the Inflation Reduction Act. Vice President Kamala Harris, her vote was the deciding vote to get this bipartisan infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act passed in the Senate. And as we begin to look at the confusion around this, we're talking 90 days, ladies and gentlemen. When you're talking about 90 days and you're talking about the interest on $1.7 trillion, which has been completely stopped, we're talking about 66,000 projects nationwide in road constructions and in bridge projects. We're talking the CHIPS Act, $539 million in the CHIPS Act. We're talking about $800 billion in public sector dollars to match $1 trillion in private sector investment because of these tax incentives that the Biden-Harris administration created with this process. And then you got, here we got Trump, who rides in and says to everyone, you see what I just signed? I watched the signing. It without any consideration of the impact that this is going to have on the American people. As an American citizen who is being impacted by this, and we'll get to that because we're going to drill down on that. Donald Trump wants to slam the door on the lifeline that has created hundreds of thousands of jobs. It's upgrading the country's infrastructure through and brought about the rebirth to the American manufacturing. The Sierra Club executive director Ben Jealous said Tuesday in a statement, the industry observers have been expecting the Trump administration to halt spending for federal agencies that have yet to allocate, but the text of the executive order leaves unclear whether the freeze will also target spending that has already been obligated. Our legally committed order contract, a Biden administration official reported on Friday that $96.7 billion in clean energy grants are about 84% of the grant funding from the infrastructure has been obligated. Our legally committed order contract, a Biden administration. That is what we're talking about here, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking about 80% of these grants have already been through legal contracts that have been signed. One of those initiatives came through the Environmental Protection Agency, which is called the Greenhouse Gas Initiative. Inside of the Greenhouse Gas Initiative, my former Senator Van Hollen introduced legislation with the senator from Vermont, and $27 billion was put into the Greenhouse Gas Initiative for the establishment of green banks to finance projects to combat climate change. And those green banks are in about 20 states right now. The Connecticut Green Bank was the first established. We also have a Montgomery County Green Bank here in the state of Maryland, and we also have the District of Columbia has also established a green bank in Washington, D.C., and they are leveraging the public sector dollars with private sector dollars to move to employ and construct renewable energy projects in these inside the states and municipalities. These are the type of commitments and obligations that the federal government has already contracted. So when we begin to look at the impact of these things, what do they really mean? So as we continue to drill down and look at this article, that includes tens of billions of loans and loan guarantees issued by the Department of Energy Loan Programs Office, which under the Biden administration supported electric vehicle and battery factories, battery mineral mining processes, and recycling facilities, distributed solar and battery deployment, EV charging projects, alternative aviation fuels, clean hydrogen production plants, and nuclear reactors. Of the approximately $107.57 billion the Biden LPO awarded across 53 deals, just under $60.62 billion consistent of loans and guarantees that have been finalized and obligated according on Friday to the update of the Department of Energy here in Washington, D.C. DOE. Obligated funding also includes $27 billion for the so-called Green mentioned that, created by the Inflation Reduction Act, which will help fund climate projects that struggle to secure private sector loans. About $3 billion of the $5 billion grant program for electric and vehicle emission school buses, and about $5 billion in climate pollution reduction grants and states for local governments, tribes, territories, finance plans, and to reduce greenhouse gas emissions for the air pollution. So we are dealing with some serious stuff here this morning, ladies and gentlemen, on this platform of solar now and the future with this economic impact on Black America. And disproportionately, when we began to look at the $1.7 trillion, it was very, very important that I was able to listen to the head of the National Black Chamber of Commerce here in Washington, D.C., was on Roland Martin's Black Star Network on the other evening, and he was talking about that there was approximately 634 billion dollars, which was being spent in government contracts. And he mentioned that African Americans, we had about in 2023, I think it was 1.5%, and they've been working trying to increase those numbers. Hispanics were just a little ahead of us, around 1.8%. And we looked at all the other minorities, but the leading beneficiary of government contracts was white women. And they've been receiving 78% of that $334 billion in contracts, and they went out and voted 53% of white women against their own interests, and who is benefiting from these programs. This is how low can your IQ go? I'm looking at this, and I'm trying to make sense out of something that does not make sense. So other grant funding projects at risk include, like I said, the bipartisan infrastructure law, $7 billion for the hydrogen hub program, from which a fraction has been obligated, and more than $22 billion in grants to fund power grid projects across the country, on which more than $10 billion has been awarded to utilities, companies, and state, local, and tribal governments, but just a smaller slice has been obligated. Only a portion of the IRA $8.8 billion in home efficiency and electrification rebates and incentives, and $9.5 billion in rural electrification programs have been obligated. I hope y'all are understanding that I'm not making up any of this. I'm reading this article on what this executive order really means when you're talking about 90 days in business, ladies and gentlemen. That's almost a quarter of a year. It's something called timelines, and in business, time is money. The executive order also singles out the immediate pause of $7.5 billion for EV charging infrastructure grants created by the bipartisan infrastructure law. Of the $5 billion segment of these grants earmarked for large charging hubs along major highways and transit corridors, many guess is about 2/3 of those are under contract with the state, said Lauren McDonald, chief analyst at EV charge data firm from Harris. And I would assume that those that are under contract could not be called back. How could you basically promise money to an applicant? They start construction, and then you pull it back. And that's what I'm talking about, ladies and gentlemen. We have private sector entities that have already invested billions of dollars in Liberty, North Carolina. Toyota Motor Company is investing $20 billion to build a electric vehicle plant to supply electric vehicles in Chester, South Carolina. Albemarle Corporation, which is an Australian corporation, but their corporate headquarters is located in Charlotte, North Carolina. They've already broke ground. They're investing $1.6 billion to build a lithium manufacturing facility to supply lithium to Ford and General Motors and Toyota. Let me be clear on this, ladies and gentlemen. This will throw the U.S. economy in shock. We are very, very, very astute as the impact of what this madness is about, but we have to understand, well, why is this? Well, we're going to look at why this is taking place. Okay. Other grants funded projects and risks include the bipartisan infrastructure law. Okay. Now, and in a general analysis, said it would be difficult for the Trump to undo obligated awards made by the Biden administration. Paul Chonut, managing director of equity research for the Raymond James Associates, told the Carnegie Media that any attempt to cancel, that is to say, renege on previous approved loans and grants, should be the case for freezing spending for obligated funds, would immediately lead to lawsuits from companies involved. While the new administration can prevent further loans or grants from being authorized, that is not the same thing as canceling existing ones. It remains unclear of the Office of Management and Budget and the National Economic Council will manage to process and reviving the agency's reports, mandates under an executive order. Much depends on how the Trump administration instructs these officers to interpret the executive order and the broad language. The order states no funds shall be distributed by a given agency until the director of OMB assists to the President of Economic Policy have determined that such disbursements are consistent with the review recommendations that they have been adopted for. Now, by a given agency until the director of OMB assists to the President of Economic Policy. Trump's new OBM head has to argue that the president can choose to withhold federal funds appropriated, but Congress, through the process called impoundment, argued challenges to constitutionality of law passed in 1974, barring the president from interfering with Congress' constitutionally defined powers over taxing and spending. That is what I thought, ladies and gentlemen, because the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act was passed by the U.S. Congress and Senate. Interfering with Congress' constitutionally defined powers over taxing and spending. That is what I thought, ladies and gentlemen. Rob Dringlick, President Power of Grid Consultancy with Grid Strategies, noted in a Tuesday special media post that the federal agencies has the power not to discretionary grants and appointees will certainly want to follow executive orders that on that front. However, many grants programs created by two laws are structured as a mandatory grant, and stopping mandatory grants would be illegal territory of impoundment law and requires that the money is spent, he wrote, unless added, the U.S. Supreme Court says otherwise. The federal agencies are forced to halt disbursement of these mandatory grants and funds already obligated, has a broad implication on the constitutional balance of executive authority relative to Congress funding and direction. OBM did not immediately respond to the Carnegie Media request for comment. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as I indicated to you, this show would be one that you want to definitely listen to, one that you want to get out to your friends and neighbors, because see, this is impacting on thousands of federal jobs. As I indicated, I have been beating the drum with Mr. Antoine Thompson, who is the director of the Greater Washington Region Clean Cities Collaboration Group. And their area of concentration is working with municipalities around electric vehicles, infrastructure, green hydrogen, and helping low and moderate income communities and municipalities secure federal funding and grants from programs for electric buses. They have won awards for our nation's capital, for Baltimore City, Falls Church, Virginia, public school systems, grants to purchase electric vehicles to be put into on the streets to take some of the emissions out of our kids' lungs when they go into school in the morning. So if people don't understand how this affects you, all you got to do is be standing at the bus stop in the morning and catching them fumes from these fossil fuels from these buses. We try to break things down and make things plain so the goats can get it, as my dear friend Joe Madison used to say. You know. So what we're going to do, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to look at well, what's behind all this? He signs this executive order, but really, what's behind all this? So we try to look and make sure that people can understand what this is really about. So we're going to sort of switch gears here on the platform of solar now and the future with its economic impact on Black America. And we're going to look at what's the driving force behind these executive orders. Well, author Charles Harper, and this is Melanie, come on, with the Evergreen Action Group, they wrote a very, very stelling and telling article that I think will clear up all the confusion, if you think there is some confusion on why they are doing this. As I said, smoke and mirrors, ladies and gentlemen, let's look at what this really is about. This June, 65 million Americans across 13 states will see their monthly electricity bills increase by 30%, all because of one shadowy organization standing in the way of low-cost clean energy. That organization is the PJM Interconnection. In other words, the PJM that runs the electric grid for the state of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, Delaware, Ohio, Tennessee, West Virginia, and the District of Columbia, and parts of Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Michigan, and North Carolina. Let's get real. Let's look at what this really is about. And it is raising energy prices for homes and business owners this June of 2025 by up to 30%. The question is why? Because the PJM is not connecting new energy to the grid fast enough, causing a shortfall in reliable power and skyrocketing annual energy auction prices. That the shortfall has largely the fault of the PJM and the energy and utility companies that tell it what to do, that stand to profit from higher prices. Annual energy auction prices that the shortfall has largely the fault of the PJM and the energy and utility companies that tell it what to do, that stand to profit from higher prices. Now, ladies and gentlemen, an annual report market auction for the largest U.S. electric grid operator resulted in prices 100% higher than last year as the supply dwindled, the demand increased, the operator said Tuesday. The PJM interconnection, which covers parts of 13 states from Illinois to New Jersey, has revealed the result of its 2025 and 2026 capacity auction. The prices of the power plant landed at $269.92 per megawatt. They compared to today, it is $28.92 per megawatt. Higher than last year as from the year ago auction, grid operators said in a statement. Now, this is how we're being played, ladies and gentlemen. I'm looking at my electricity bill right here in Tacoma Park, Maryland, and I just went through this with my gas company, which has switched from Energy Direct to Washington Gas, and with no notification other than what's on the bill, and there is a $84 distribution fee on the bill. I call the customer service. I say, you're charging me $84 for the gas coming that you're saying is coming to my home, which only thing I have in my home is that runs off of gas is a hot water heater. They're charging me almost $200 a month, and I'm looking at a 30% increase over above this, and I'm looking at these additional costs and fees. So when we begin to look at the game, what is this is about? Distribution charge. 1.63.7 tenths. $84.20. Okay. To process their payment with Stride, they're charging me $1.99. Empower Maryland surcharge. Empower Maryland surcharge. $6.61. System charge. $11.85. Taxes. Prince George's County, $13.79. Total, $118.45. That ain't got nothing to do with what I'm using in my house, ladies and gentlemen, in terms of the amount of gas I'm actually using. These are just fees attached onto the bill. Now, they are talking about another increase in this 30%. But let's go down and look at what we're really talking about, ladies and gentlemen. Shares of independent power producers from nuclear fleets, including Constellation Energy, CEGO, Vista, Tailing, jumped in after hours trading following auction. The Constellations were up about 10% to $185.10. Vista rose from 12% to $77.50, and Taylor rose 18%, according to data that has been published. These are the things that we need to be looking at, ladies and gentlemen, as it relates to what does this really mean? Now, what is the PJM and why should we be paying attention to it? The regional transmission organization like PRJM are responsible for managing and operating the local utilities, which they then provide to consumers. The transmission of organizations that run electric grids, hold regular auctions, to make sure that there's enough power plants that will be available to provide electricity for subsistent years. The transmission organizations, along with our power companies, also manage the construction of large lines and decide on which proposed power plants can be hooked up. The interconnection to the grid, basically the PJM and utilities make many of the decisions and affect how much people pay in their region for on their electricity bills. The PJM is the largest such transmission organization that controls the grid. 65 million Americans, 20% of the country. The PJM is a limited liability company that has thousands of voting members, primarily energy companies, customers that have a significant influence over PJM operations. Well, it sounds like we got to get some damn stock and go to this shareholders meeting. The PJM also holds regular auctions to determine which type of energy source power, homes, weather, affordable renewable options for polluting, expensive fossil fuels. This makes PJM an increasingly powerful organization. While PJM makes the energy resource decisions, it's ultimate their customers who will pay for them. And recently, the PJM has been making lousy business decisions, like delaying the interconnection of wind and solar energy projects and how much power that they use. But it varies from 2% to 30%. In Philadelphia, it is 10% increase in their monthly bills. In Chicago, it's $7.50 to $10 per month. In New Jersey, it's $12 to $15 per month. In Maryland, it's $4 to $21 per month. That's real crazy. From $4 to $21 a month. That could add up to $252 million more in just 1 year. Why is PJM raising prices? Skyrocketing prices in this year's energy auction resulted from the increase of demand driven by data centers development, unreliable fossil fuels during extreme weather, and the PJM's inability to approve construction of new energy projects, 95% which are clean energy to meet the demand. And that's the problem. That's the problem. They have been blocking the permitting. And this is one of the first things that Trump did in the executive order. They shut down all permitting for wind and solar. The Department of Energy and EPA have been working on this issue. I have been on numerous webinars during last year talking around this issue about the permitting process and getting more of these renewable energy projects uplinked, which is one of the major problems that we as African Americans in the clean energy sector have. If you have been in the industry, I have served as the president of the National Association of Blacks in Solar for the last 5 years. I've looked at these uplink issues time and time again when we've been contacted by private black landowners and farmers who have land, who wanted to build solar and wind farms on their properties. We're not making, I don't have to make up any of this, ladies and gentlemen. These are things that we have observed. We understand that if you didn't apply when you had the opportunity, now it's too late. Well, 90% of the African American municipal townships and small towns, the organization headed by the Honorable Johnny Ford, which I am a member, wanted to know what they had to do to access the money. They had to apply, but you had to have money for technical assistance to pay grant writers. People don't write grant proposals for you for free. This has been a complete fiasco as it relates to the question that I raised 5 years ago. Where is the Green Economic Development Plan in the implementation of the bipartisan infrastructure bill known as Build Back Better and the Inflation Reduction Act? With all of these billions of dollars in grants, in 2021, the National Association of Blacks in Solar, working with Tuvalu College out of Mississippi, we applied for a $19 million grant to start the first workforce development training program, which would be targeted for specifically for minorities and African Americans, to train our young people how to become energy advisors, electricians for EV charging infrastructure, and installers for rooftop solar and framing for rooftop solar. And for EV charging, for electrical training for our electricians to become sufficient with construction and EV charging for both commercial and residential EV charging, to maintain the need and growth in this industry. We were not successful in getting the grant. It was called the Good Jobs Challenge. There was $525 million in that specific grant. It was over 500 applications. We had 9 HBCUs that had submitted some 11 grant applications. Only 2 were in the renewable energy area, which was the grant application by North Carolina A&T, who partnered with Siemens Energy and Duke Energy. And we know they are 2 of the largest players in the energy game in America. We were working with African American-based firms in Washington, D.C., WDC Solar, which was headed by Mr. Mark Davis. Power 52, which is a workforce development training cadre located in Howard County, Maryland, headed by Mrs. Cherie Brooks. We had Mrs. Chanel Benefit of Columbus, Georgia. We had solar apprenticeships out of Atlanta, Georgia. We had Mr. Will R. Shelley, Sundial Solar in Jackson, Mississippi. We were the first. We were not successful in attaining that grant, but it would have had tremendous impact in what we were trying to do and trying to move the African American forward in this new industry. But we were denied that funding, and then the agency came back and tried to tell us it was a level playing field when we realized it wasn't a level playing field in the beginning, because we were competing against state governments and many large historically white colleges and universities and utility companies. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we are looking at what this real deal is about. Trump has signed these executive orders to log jam and to squeeze people on a timeline that they're on. PJM is prioritizing unreliable gas over clean energy. This is what this is about, ladies and gentlemen. Despite its slow interconnection progress, There's one source of energy PJM is choosing to prioritize. It is the expensive, dire one gas instead of fixing it in sequence and allowing cheap, clean energy to come online to save customers money. PJM is all in on expensive and unreliable fossil fuel technology. That's the bottom line, ladies and gentlemen. That is what this is about. I told you if you listen to this, we would go right to the source. PJM's decision-making to showcase a conflict of interest. Customers want lower cost, less pollution, and reliable energy. And the states with cleaner energy goals want more renewables online, not less. But the PJM is overlooking the interests of millions of Americans in its service territory by choosing to prioritize the dirty, expensive energy instead. Gas plants have already led with higher prices. One of the reasons is that the capacity auction prices are higher this year because the widespread failure of gas plants in winter storms. Gas power plants in the region there are rated previously by PJM 90 to 95% available fell to 62 to 79% in this auction. Gas plants and pipelines are more likely to fail during extreme weather. And that is what we're talking about. Now, two governors, Shapiro of Pennsylvania, credit. Last week, 4 former governors sent a letter to the Federal Regulatory Commission in support of Pennsylvania's complaint against the PJM's capacity auction. The letter signed by Governor Westmore of Maryland, B.J. Fritz, and Phil Murray, former governor, Bethany Hall Long echoes Shapiro's concerns of PJ's energy grid management and the subsequent rise in costs to consumers. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a problem with all of this because, see, I've heard also Brooks and Westmore talking about this new data processing facility coming to my county, Prince George's County here in Maryland. And I know that it's going to push the energy cost up another 20% on top of this 30%. Let's get real, ladies and gentlemen. We need to be picking up the phone calling our elected officials because ain't nobody going to save us but us. And everybody seems to think that we don't have the right to question this because it is not a need. It is a necessity. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of another exciting edition of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. Ladies and gentlemen, this show is brought to you every week by the National Association of Blacks in Solar, the Black Sports Legends BSLF HBCU Solar Radio Talk Show Initiative. We are streaming via Facebook, Twitter, and Link, and we are, in fact, broadcasting through the platform of Blog Talk Radio. We are streaming via our YouTube channel over our YouTube station called the Positive Change PC Online Radio TV Broadcast Network. And we would greatly appreciate it if you would pass the word about this podcast, Solar Now and the Future, with its economic impact on Black America. And so we don't want you to hear every week. We want you to beat us back here as we can close another exciting edition of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. Till next week, we say go in peace. As we close another exciting edition of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America.